welcome to Rose Theater Weekly. I am your host, Christina Maroney, also your RHS theater teacher. So behind me here, for those of you who haven't seen it before, I just thought I would show you. This is my wall of nerd, amazing artwork. So a lot of you know Xavier and I are involved in a medieval recreation group, and so all of these things you see here are basically recognitions or scrolls or awards, things that we have done before. So super cool. So I thought I would share that with you. But we're going to get started for this week. Before we do, students of mine, there is a fun new challenge posted on your Google Classroom. So check that out if you haven't yet. Basically what we're doing, this is for any of my students, if you want, it's just for fun, we are doing a DIY challenge. And so here's the challenge for this week. We have a theme, and the theme is superheroes / supervillains. So your challenge, if you choose to accept it, is to do 3 things and then email those things to me. 1 is to create a brand new superhero or supervillain, okay, and give us their name. Send me a photo of you in some kind of an outfit that is fitting for them. It can be ridiculous. It should be made up, remember. So this is not like, oh, I've got an Iron Man costume at home, I'm going to dress as Iron Man. No. That's the whole point, is you have to make it up based on what you have in your house. Okay, so their name, picture of you in their getup, and a brief, paragraph, maybe 2 if you want, backstory or origin story of them. So I'll take any entries that people want to send in until next Thursday at midnight, and then I will have my husband make a decision on who is the winner. So that way it is impartial, I'm not making the call, and my dogs probably wouldn't do a great job at choosing it, so Xavier is the option. And so I will announce that in next week's Rose Theater Weekly, and I will show your stuff there if you are willing to let me do that. So just for fun, but if you want to take on a creative challenge, if you feel like your creative brain is starting to get a little mushy, this would be a fun way to fix that. This week, it was requested that I do a sort of tell-all of shows that I've been involved in. So I'm calling this segment Story Time with Auntie M. Without further ado, we are going to head over to that, but do stay tuned because I've got one more cool piece that I want to show you at the end of this video as well. So away we go, Auntie M. Welcome to Story Time with Auntie M. That's this nickname we're trying out. We'll see if it sticks. So this week I was requested to talk about my shows that I've been in, not ones that I've directed, but shows that I've actually been in as an actor. So I was thinking through them. You can see my helper back here. I was thinking through my shows, and I think what I'm going to do is go from most recent to back in the past. Hello, Velma. And, grab your tea, cozy up next to a very real fireplace like this one, obviously. Fire hot. And, we'll take a little stroll down memory lane. The most recent show I was in fact, the last 4 shows I was in were all at UACT, which is Umpqua Actors Community Theater, our community theater here in Roseburg. So most recently, I was on stage in Clue the musical, and I played Mrs. Peacock, which was a super fun role, probably my favorite role in terms of song I got to sing on stage. Every character had at least one solo or duet piece, and I'm really partial to my song. Even if I didn't get cast in that role, it probably still would have been my favorite. So those of you who don't know, I have a cat, and also Mrs. Peacock is the sort of Black Widow of sorts, where she had 6 husbands and they all died under mysterious circumstances, and she's rich. Oh, what a surprise. I wonder how that happened. So she's super fun. The song she sings in the musical version of Clue is called Once a Widow. I did my own choreography to that song. It was a lot of fun. Before that, I was part of the 3-person company for Complete Works of William Shakespeare Abridged. Also one of my top favorite shows in terms of role that I got to play, because it was so much fun. It was wacky. If you don't know the show, it's essentially 3 people sort of making up, but sort of not, all of the Shakespeare shows and sonnets in about 90 minutes. I really don't know how else to describe it, except that everybody plays about a billion different characters. There's lots of wigs and dresses and, prop bodies being thrown around. It is amazing. Super, super funny. If you ever get a chance to see it or be involved in it, highly recommend. Before that, I was in a show called Lend Me a Tenor, and this is one where it's essentially about a guy who is this world-famous tenor, this opera singer, and he has some issues, and there's another guy who sort of takes responsibility for him and then plays him because the other guy is sort of out of commission. It's this whole thing. It's definitely a farce, which means it's a particular type of comedy. There's lots of sight gags. There's a bunch of doors on stage, and all of the doors opening and closing at just the right times is very much a farcical thing to do. I played Maria, who was the tenor's wife, and she was very Italian and very loud and had a lot of opinions about things. It was really fun. It was one of those that, gives you a lot of release during rehearsal. Like, you're not going to hurt anybody, but getting to throw a pillow at the same person over and over again, even when I wasn't stressed out, it was kind of this nice stress reliever. So nothing personal, Gary. It was great to work with you, but also it was really fun throwing pillows at you. Before that was my first show at UACT, which was Into the Woods. So I ended up playing 3 different characters in that show. I was Cinderella's mother, who's the sort of weird voice in the tree for part of a scene. And then I was Cinderella's stepmother as well, which is an interesting switch over from that. And then I also was in a scene as Red Riding Hood's granny, which was a lot of fun. Brief, but fun. So that show, I would say as an adult, was the one that was most like a family by the end. Some shows are that more than others. Not every show is, but that was certainly one of them. It was just such a fun group of people, and that's where I met really my first friends since moving to Roseburg as an adult. So that show has a special place in my heart for a number of reasons. Before I moved back to Roseburg area, I was in 2 shows in Eugene. And one of them was at the Very Little Theater, which is one of the Eugene community theaters, and it was Arsenic and Old Lace, as some of you know very well. I played Elaine in that show, so I was the fiance to Mortimer and the one who was sort of kidnapped and sort of the damsel in distress. It was a lot of fun. My costumes were beautiful. I got to wear the most amazing period-appropriate satin dresses and velvet hats, and it was just wonderful. And it was the first time as an adult I really got to explore how I was as an actor and what I could bring to the table. So it was really valuable for that reason, too. I was also in a show with a group called Roving Park Players, and what they do is they either write or they take shows that are old enough that don't have royalties attached to them, so the shows are free to produce, and they put on shows at a different outdoor location each weekend for a couple of weekends. So like a bunch of different park areas around Eugene and Springfield, which is really cool. It has its own challenges, of course, not having a regular auditorium setup, so sound is sometimes an issue if it's really windy, but it was a lot of fun too. So that play was called 5 Children and It, and I was a number of different characters in it, but the main one was the Queen of Babylon, and she was a lot of fun. She was sort of this, came back, the kids who were some of the main characters went back in time, and they came across this Queen of Babylon, and she was insisting that they give her these jewels, and she's smacking at a box with a flip-flop to try and open it. It's a fun, silly show. And before that, though, I took sort of this hiatus, I guess. So as an undergrad and graduate student and teacher for the first few years, I wasn't doing a whole lot of theater. As an undergrad, I was directing. I did assistant stage manager for a show, and so I had the time for those things, but I wasn't in anything really. But it was where I first started directing, and so that's what got me really excited about directing and wanting to continue on as I moved forward and started my career. So if I hadn't started doing that at the time I did, I mean, I would still be doing it now, but I don't know if I would have come into it with as much excitement as I did as an adult. So I'm glad I got to have that opportunity. Before I started my undergrad, now we are back into my high school days, and that's where I really got to discover theater. If you haven't heard this story, it was actually my rookie drama class as a freshman going into our little theater at South Umpqua High School. And that's where I went into this sort of darkened room and people were being told to sit in a circle. So I sat in this circle, and that's where I met Brad Allen, who was my drama teacher. And when I left the class that day, I knew I wanted to be a high school theater teacher. And that never went away, which is kind of amazing. Brad and I have stayed really close. He actually walked me down the aisle at my wedding recently, and he's family. So I love that I was able to carry on his legacy, as it were, when I came into RHS, because that's when he retired. So anyway, I digress. So working with him in all of my high school shows, he was the director for all of them. And so working backwards from senior year, we did a play and a musical each year, just like I do now at RHS. And so the shows, my senior year, we did a musical called No No Nanette. It's not as well known now, but it was basically a show that took place back in the 1920s, 1930s era, and it was kind of silly and it was kind of fun, but it was definitely appropriate for the time in terms of, oh, well, Nanette, you're a girl, so you shouldn't be allowed to go do what you want. You should do what you're told, and all of these things. So I played a character who was sort of adjacent to Nanette. I was one of the adult friends of the family, and I got to sing a fun song there. My husband in the show was wanting to go to basically a casino and get to go play for the weekend. And the song basically says, well, you can dance with anyone at all as long as you come home with me. So I don't know that that's how I personally live my life, but it was a fun song to sing. And then we got to end it really close, face to face, very angry at each other. So, that's always fun in theater. The play I did that year was actually The Curious Savage. So that's the one we just put on at RHS, for those of you who don't know. And I played Ethel Savage in that show. It was a really fun way to cap off plays my senior year. She's a great character to play as, a 17-year-old trying to tap into the mind of a 60-ish-year-old. Kind of a challenge. There's obviously things that I can't personally relate to at that point, but as I've reread the show and then directed it recently, it's been really fun to see how my perception of her has changed because, I'm still not quite 60. Cosette, shut your mouth. But I do have more life experience at this point than I did when I was 17, of course, so I can understand at least better where she's coming from. My junior year, we did Music Man for our musical, which is the story of Harold Hill coming to River City, Iowa, and trying to sell them on some stuff. In this case, the stuff is a whole bunch of instruments to put a band together. There's a song from that show, Trouble in River City. If you don't know it, it's super fun. If you're partial to musicals and you think your voice isn't great for carrying a tune, but you can keep a rhythm well, it's one of the songs I really recommend checking out for, a performance type piece, because that's exactly what it requires. So I got to play the Widow Peru. One of the main characters in the show is Marion, and she's the librarian. Yes, it rhymes, and there's a whole song about it rhyming. They actually rhyme the word carrion, which is like roadkill, with Marion and librarian, so there's some choices made there. But I was her mother in the show, so that's the first time I had to have an accent in a show. I think the only time, actually, I've had to have an accent in a show. So that was a different type of challenge for me. And it was, it was a lot of fun. And the set design included a little house front for the Peru's house. And so I got to have my own little house. And because our theater space was also our classroom space, I specifically remember when we went into the theater and had some silent reading time, I would go hide in my house because it was mine and I was allowed to, which was kind of awesome, actually. Thanks, Brad, for letting me do that. So the play we did that year was Rough Crossing by Tom Stoppard. Very funny show, very English. And so it's some sort of mistaken information type thing, not mistaken identity, but mistaken information. This guy loves this girl, and he thinks she's in love with this other guy, and he mishears some things, and comedy ensues. But it also focuses on these two writers who are trying to write a play while they are on a voyage crossing the sea on this ship. And so I was one of those two writers, and so the type of comedy that Tom Stoppard writes is pretty specific. It's a really fun show. I'd recommend reading it if you're looking for some new to you stuff to read. My sophomore year, the musical we did was Godspell. If you don't know that one, it's this sort of like hippie musical based on some of the Gospels from the Bible. Oddly, it's sort of popular to do in high schools, which I think is kind of weird personally, just because it's this religious text, but you're doing it in public school. So anyway, that's a whole other conversation. But we did it when I was in high school, and I think because of the size of the cast and the way the show was written, that's probably the one as a high school student that was most like a family to me. That was the night where, closing night, we knew some of our seniors were graduating and we were all crying in a circle, and you all know how that goes. So that was that show for me. And then the play we did that year was actually one written by our teacher, and it was the Zelda Ziegfeld Minimum Security All-Girls Ballroom Dancing School, something like that. And it was something that he wrote. We had all started learning swing dance that year. We made a swing dance club. I was president. It was a lot of fun. We would meet after school on Fridays just to practice and have a good time. And so he took that concept, and he also loves old movies, if you don't know Brad, and he sort of mashed those together and created a play that was, these three boys and these three girls that they were kind of into. And so the boys sneak into this all-girls school, and so they have to sneak in. And one of the boys is named Computer Head because he has an actual computer monitor as a head. So wacky. The teachers at the school are all very different. So one of them was very Che Guevara, and it was, he was introducing the tango as sort of this battle. So in the show, I played Madame Yorma, who was the headmistress of the school. And so, fun fact as well, for those of you who know Jerry Bartley, one of the roles was originally written for her, but she declined, and so we had a student who played it, and she played it great too. Good job, Alana. So it was the costume goddess, and so it was supposed to be this big production number because Jerry always made our costumes. That's how I met her as a high school student, and then we got to work together in Clue recently, and she sold my now husband my wedding ring, and we have all of these mixed relationship things now, which is awesome. So Jerry, if you're watching this, you're great. So that's pretty much it. I did some theatrical type things, mostly dance things earlier than high school, but those are the main things to talk about in terms of full-length shows that I have done, so that were not class projects. So I hope you have enjoyed this time with your Auntie M, this story time. If you have any other questions or things you want me to tell you about, let me know. Hope you enjoyed that little stroll down memory lane. One more thing, I promised you at the beginning of this video that I had another special thing to share with you. Some of my students decided we were going to make a music video. So we chose a musical theater song, and they sent me some clips of them just dancing to the song, and then I edited those clips together. It's fun, it's silly, the camera qualities are different because it's just what people have at home, but it's a good time. I'm going to put it right in here, and I hope you enjoy it.
You can't stop in avalanches of races down the hill. You can try to stop the seasons, girl, but you know you never will. And you could try to stop my dancing feet, but I just cannot stand still. 'Cause the world keeps spinning round and round. stop the river as it rushes to the sea.
You can try to stop the hands of time, but you know it just can't be.
And if they try to stop us seaweed, I'll call the NAACP. 'Cause the world keeps spinning round and round, and my heart keeping time to the speed of sound. I heard there's wrongs and I found my way. 'Cause you can't stop the beat. Ever since we first saw the light, a man and woman like to shake it on a Saturday night. So I'm gonna shake and shimmy it with all of my might today. 'Cause you can't stop the motion of the ocean or the rain from above. You can try to stop the paradise we're dreaming of, but you cannot stop the rhythm of two hearts in love to stay. 'Cause you can't stop the beat. You can't stop the beat. You can't stop the beat.
And that is now for real all I have for you this week. Join me next week for another episode of Rose Theater Weekly. And as always, if you have any requests or suggestions, what you'd like to see next, drop them in the comments or share them on my Facebook page. Have a good week. Stay safe. Keep making art.